Hello, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Bennett Richardson, the General Manager of Protocol, and I can't wait to hear from our speakers today about the state of VR in 2020. For years, it seemed like VR's moment was right around the corner, yet overhyped tech and over-the-top predictions have often failed to materialize. But something seems different this time. Better hardware, more immersive storytelling, and strong holiday sales paint a picture of VR's moment finally arriving. If there's anyone who can help us understand what's coming, it's today's expert panel, led by Protocol's own entertainment whisperer and author of our popular Next Up newsletter, Janko Roettgers. Two quick housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have questions for our panel, please hop on Twitter and ask your question using our hashtag ProtocolVR. And don't forget to sign up for Janko's newsletter Next Up to stay on top of the latest in VR and the rest of tech and entertainment. You can sign up at protocol.com/newsletters. Thanks again for joining us today. Now I'll hand it over to Janko to introduce our panel and get us started. Janko, take it away.
All right, thanks Bennett for this introduction. I am very excited about this panel. We have some great panelists here today. We have Maureen Fan, the CEO of Baobab Studios, Joanna, the global head of VR for location-based entertainment from HP, and finally, Nathan Burba, the co-founder and president of Survios. And I have to mention, we also wanted to have Tipita Chenivasan, general partner of the Venture Reality Fund here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. We'll make up for that and have him on another time. And I want to jump right in, maybe use an introductory round, both as a way for our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their company, and also reflect a little bit on 2020, this crazy year that was 2020, before we get started, look ahead at the state of VR in 2021. And Maureen, maybe we start with you. Tell us a little bit, tell the few people in the audience who may not know what Baobab is and what you do. Tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us what you've seen in general in the VR space in 2020.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Fan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Baobab Studios. We are a 6-time Emmy-winning animation studio that specializes in interactivity. And as you know, VR is all about interactivity. So that's the medium that we started off in. We're creatively led by Eric Darnell, who wrote and directed all 4 Madagascar films and also Ants. So we are specifically focused in animation. And the mission is to inspire the world to dream, bring out your sense of wonder, make you matter. And that last part, make you matter, really matters to us because it's our mission, which means we place you, the audience, into our stories. So there's always a strong narrative component to our projects. We place you in the story and you are a main character and you interact with the environment, with the stories, and you make choices that actually impact your relationship with the other characters, as well as impact the story itself. So we've been around for about 5 years, and we've seen a lot of changes in the VR industry, from the hype cycle of, the crazy investment in the beginning, which is when we started, to the trough of disillusionment where everyone was like, VR's dead, and no VCs would touch VR at all. They're like, you have to put the word AI in there instead of VR, and that's how you get funded. But then after the Quest came out, I would say we definitely saw an uptick, especially given the form factor is much easier. Even when we're going into our friends' houses, and let's say you bring the VR headset to a dinner party, you ask like, oh, by the way, we have a VR headset here in case you want to try it out. In the very beginning, I would say people were really excited to try it out, but as of a year or year and a half ago, people were like, yeah, it's kind of old and I want to put that big thing on my head. But ever since the Quest came out, people are much more likely to put it on. They're like, wait, I don't need wires to be hooked up to a computer. It's not that difficult. So we definitely saw uptick. And then after COVID happened, we saw an even bigger uptick, right, in VR downloads of content, because people are by themselves and stir crazy. And so definitely being able to escape and go into different worlds, or even to hang out with people, huge uptick, at least I'm seeing, with being able to interact with other people, whether it's in VR chat or alt space, to be able to spend time with each other, given that they can't do it in person. So that's all very exciting. That being said, I would say the VR market is very much games focused right now, because the headset manufacturers themselves, whether it's Sony PlayStation or Oculus, are very focused on marketing their headsets as gaming machines. So that is definitely the vertical or category that is growing the fastest. That being said, we're very honored that so far our projects, we've had 6 so far, starting from Invasion, Asteroids, Crow the Legend, Jack, Bonfire, and now Baba Yaga that just came out, and then Namu is at South by Southwest this week. A lot of them we've actually created in partnership with Oculus, because our projects, despite being narrative, do have a high level of interactivity in them. And so they're always looking for some premium content that is narrative to showcase that VR is not just about games. And so we're really fortunate to have been partnered with them, and our projects have done quite well.
That's a great transition to Nathan, with Survios being more on the gaming side of this. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about Survios for people in the audience who may not know the company, and then also how 2020 has played out for you, and how the Quest and then Quest 2 have sort of impacted pickup.
Yeah, so Survios, for those not familiar, is a virtual reality game company. We've been making games for a while now, since 2013. We launched raw data with the HTC Vive back in 2016, and really have not looked back. We've released 7 titles so far. Creed is our largest title, and it is out on the Quest, and it is our best performing title as well. And we've seen the same thing. Basically, sales have, especially the Quest, has basically taken off during this time. We're also, a fairly large PSVR developer. We do a lot of our revenue comes into PSVR as well, and we're also a traditional game developer. So we have Creed Big Rumble Boxing that'll be coming out in the spring. That's for the Nintendo Switch. So we're I've traditionally been a VR developer, but we've always wanted to get into some of the other platforms as well. We're also anticipating AR platforms. So really, Survios is known, I think, by everyone as the kind of the active VR developer. We try to bring as much kind of like high adrenaline, high octane excitement into virtual reality as possible. Where you look at Raw Data or Creed or Sprint Vector. We're also known for Electronauts, our musical title. So just a company that has a wide array of different things that it likes to develop, and has been around for a while now for everyone who knows about it.
And how have you seen like sales tick up with the Quest and everything? How has that played out over the last couple of months, I guess?
Yeah, so we had Creed has a really solid Quest integration, which we worked out with Oculus kind of early on, and that has helped us a lot. I would say the Quest is the #1 platform that's driving sales for us, and then PlayStation VR is coming in at #2. But right now, it's far and away the Quest.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. Last but not least, Joanna, people know HP. Not everyone may know what HP does with location-based VR. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, but then also reflect a little bit on 2020, which was sort of a tough year for location-based VR, with a lot of places closing, some of the companies going under. So what's your take on that? And then again, maybe introduce also the role that HP plays in all of this.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you. So yeah, people do know HP. We've been around now our 82nd year. So HP is credited as being the founding company of Silicon Valley. We were founded, two founders in a garage creating technology for Walt Disney for the movie Fantasia. So a really long and illustrious career in media and technology, constantly being on the forefront of the next wave of computing. And since HP has been so focused on building that next wave of computing, for us, we see VR and immersive computing, AI, 3D computing, 3D printing, all as making up what that future will be. And so for us, continuing to build and iterate into this future is incredibly important. And so with that, HP started a team focused on virtual reality now about 4 years ago, and we've since launched 3 different headsets, and we have another one coming out this spring. So we've launched 3 headsets, all 3 of them with Microsoft Windows Mixed Reality, and our most recent one, the HP Reverb G2, together with Valve as well. So we were really, really excited to work with great partners in in Microsoft and Valve. For those who don't know, Valve is clearly a huge leader in terms of gaming as a publisher and a platform and game creator, but also has created a lot of the technology involved in most of the leading headsets over the years. So we were really happy to work with them. And then we have another headset called the HP Reverb G2 Omniscept Edition, which adds in biometrics and biometric tracking that's going to launch this spring. So it adds in pupillometry, eye tracking, heart rate sensor, and face camera. So it creates that environment to be two-way, not just information flowing from the headset to the user, but information from the user flowing back to the content creators. And we'll be launching a cognitive load software package as well with that. And then we have 3 different backpacks, which I've worked with many of you on this in this panel with the project with the VR backpacks before. With Maureen, with Jack, and with Survios, with a variety of projects as well. And so as far as location-based entertainment, I would break in what happened in 2020, I would say specifically around location-based entertainment, companies went in 3 different directions, and generally it depended on their financial model, their business model, and their sort of financial viability going into the pandemic. So in some cases, they exited either through a shutdown or an acquisition or an acqui-hire. And so that's one group. A second group either adopted or pivoted into other areas, so adjacent areas. They maybe took their content and moved it more to an at-home model, or they took their LBE content and looked more towards the education or training market. In some cases, they were already doing that in advance, but maybe put more of their emphasis and more of their model in that area. And then in the third case, they took March and April to stop, strategize. Most of the companies were just running nonstop, leading into the pandemic last year. So gave them a chance to take a beat, see what needed to be done, assess, and then adapted. And so there's a lot of companies that we work really closely with that use our backpacks, use our headsets, who have adapted. They've adapted their operational models, they've adapted the content in some cases, they've adapted to become touchless environments, they've adapted the number of people that can go through the pods. And those companies, the numbers we've seen are doing really, really well. Depending on local regulations and the environment in different places, once they reopen, we've seen really strong numbers in many cases either at or nearly at the year-over-year numbers from prior to the pandemic. So really, really nice recoveries in many cases. And many of them that we're working with are actually starting to open even new locations, showing the health of their model.
It's interesting that you split that up in these 3 different groups. I guess one other way to look at the location-based space is 2 slices, which is the higher-end market, which free roam and sort of elaborate setups and stages. And then the lower end, the mom and pop shops, the more arcades that just take regular titles and bring them to the mall or to the theater or whatnot. And Nathan, I think you've worked with that tier more in the past. And what have you seen from partners there, from just distributing Survios titles to these arcades and working with them?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the pandemic is concerned, it's it's obviously not good. There's a lot of mom and pop arcades who are closing. Mercifully, our arcade in the Del Amo Fashion Center, a pipe had burst before the pandemic had started. So, but I think we would have shuttered it with the pandemic. I mean, there's no way to be able to do business that way for the mom and pops. I can't kind of speak for the larger ones, but we had been running our arcade distribution network. That definitely took a huge hit from the pandemic for sure.
So maybe we can open that up a little bit. And I'm also interested in everybody's view of what this means for VR and VR adoption in general, because if you think a year or maybe 18 months back, there was this notion that maybe location-based VR could be this stepping stone, while people don't have headsets yet, or maybe aren't used to the medium as much yet. This could be the way for them to go back in, or people maybe had bad experience early on with the cardboard headset, and then they go to a void or something and realize, oh, there's so much more that VR can be. So maybe I have to give this whole medium another look. I have to change my conception about, with the void shutting down, with a lot of these other places, at least being forced to pause. What does that mean sort of for VR adoption in general?
I actually have a question for Joanna, because since you're the expert for LB, in terms of just a business model, in terms of dollars per square feet, it seems like in order to have a great business model, you need people coming back over and over, which means you need fresh new content, which to me, which is why I thought the Void would work out, because as long as they keep on having new IP, right, it would get new people to come in. But we saw that the Void, what has struggled so far, partially because it's the pandemic. But do you think that business model works? And for a lot of these other people who are starting these location-based entertainment for like one project, like how does that sustain if they don't continue to have more IP or get repeat traffic?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things in what you said. So one model is, have the same people come back for new content, and another model is there's enough people in the market that you could constantly have new people coming in or coming in bringing their friends, or even I think with Dreamscape their stats are that people come. I can't remember the exact stat, but it's double digit, into it maybe approaching 60, 70, 80, 90% people come back again. I can't remember the exact number, but coming once drives people to want to come again, and drives people to want to bring their friends and expose them, because of what they're doing is such a fun experience and they want to bring other people into that interactive experience with them. So I would say, the companies that I've seen that have been doing well, like in this environment, and that have the majority of their locations open and are bringing back big numbers, are, I would put Dreamscape in that category. I would put Zero Latency in that category, and a number of others. And so they all have a number of different titles. But what we've seen is that some people come back and play the game again that they have played previously, and then other people always wanting to try something new. But to Janko, to your original question, I mean, I think it's clear that I would say VR has gone through these phases where we all thought it was going to be at home, and then that wasn't taking off quite as fast, and then we all thought it was going to be location-based entertainment, and many people would have their first great experience in location-based entertainment, as well as a push to enterprise and education. So for us, there's a couple of things. I mean, I would say in terms of what we saw last year, the overall numbers, for our company as well as all the other the headset companies out there are way up. Our headset sales of this current HP Reverb G2 is multiples compared to our previous headsets, and Oculus and other companies have released their numbers showing that they're multiples as well. So for us, it's where we've seen lots of growth this year is particularly around enterprise, as well as at home gaming. And so we see people using VR to learn, to connect, to collaborate, and to create. There's so many environments right now, work environments, where you're not able to do what you would want to do in person, that we're seeing a push towards VR. And then on the education side, there's all of our stimulus packages are pumping a lot of money into prepping the educational world for school of the future, potential future pandemics. And so, last March, all of the kids got sent home. Some of them had laptops, some of them didn't have laptops or didn't have enough in the family, right? So, and certainly most people didn't have VR headsets, but as schools are thinking about how do we have our kids prepared for the future, they're getting better prepared so that next time, if something like this ever happens again, kids don't have to just sit and stare at Zoom for hours a day. And VR is definitely a part of that consideration for the future. And so I think we'll continue to see spikes from that area as well.
Joanna, the flip side of collaboration, which you mentioned, is obviously for consumers just social VR, which I think we've seen a pickup in 2020 as well, with everybody be stuck at home and people starting to pick up Quest headsets and headsets in general. Wondering what everybody thinks where that will go, and what potential it has also for companies, for your companies maybe to get involved. And Maureen, I know you did some a film premiere actually recently that I attended, which was a lot of fun in VR. So any lessons that you took away from that?
Yeah, to be totally honest, I was very skeptical going in. I was like, oh, I have to mail these headsets to all these people and then teach them how to get into VR and all that. But Jennifer Hudson and Daisy Ridley, who are two of the talent that are voice actresses in Baba Yaga, they were really into it. They're like, yeah, this is really cool. Since we can't go anywhere, let's come in. We created avatars in Altspace for them. We all had avatars, and we had our premiere party because we couldn't have the normal red carpet premiere party that we usually do to celebrate a film launch. So we all got together within Altspace and we straight up made a red carpet. We had the step and repeat. We had the theater stage, all of that. And it was amazing. And I would say everybody who came out of that experience had a really good time because you really felt like you were there. and it was, I would say, a huge success, and people in the audience really enjoyed it. And it was surprising because when I was there, I totally forgot that I wasn't actually there, and I was sitting right here where I am right now with a headset on, right? And then shortly after that, there was Sundance Film Festival, and they had their entire creator thing in VR chat, and I was in there. Same thing. I found it refreshing. Lots of times I don't want to go to these events because I'm an introvert, so I don't want to hang out with people. But something about being in VR lets me still be introvert because I feel like I still have control. Yeah, I can engage with other people. But it's funny because you don't have the normal facial expressions, all the things that you normally can do. So you instead have to press like emoticons or make funny gestures to try to emote. But there are also some cool things in there that you can do that you couldn't do in real life, like fly or jump really high. And conversation starters become about like the avatar that you created rather than like, what's the weather like? So I found it extremely compelling and wanting to go back for more. And you see everybody is trying to create the metaverse right now. Besides Facebook Horizons, Roblox has announced their metaverse plan. So it seems like everyone sees that as a future, whether it's VR or not VR. There's this desire for you to be able to connect with each other remotely in that way. So I think, and I'm not at all glad that COVID has happened, but I do think it has gotten many people over the hump, at least adopting it so that their minds are open to it, because it's surprisingly compelling. So I hope more and more experiences integrate that for sure. And also from a business model perspective, it's a much better business model if you can include social, because I used to be vice president of games at Zynga, in charge of the Farmville franchise. And, we have all the data that if you just get one friend in there with you, how your engagement and retention increases on a daily basis. So imagine if all your friends are on there, right? How much that improves the engagement. And then you get all the UGC, which means that the platforms themselves don't have to create the content, and the audience members start creating the content instead. So it becomes self-fulfilling to make sure there's a constant stream of content, because without enough content, people get bored. And will abandon the platform.
Nathan, I think some of your titles are multiplayer titles as well, right? So have you seen a big push towards social, or is that a often requested thing, or
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our titles have, they have to have a robust single person experience, and then they have kind of a multiplayer experience where you can get someone, a friend in there, and have the experience with them. And we kind of try to, figure out what the best balance is. I mean, we saw with, Raw Data originally coming out, we had, you'd go through the entire story with up to 3 other people, which was great, but it was a giant pain in the butt from an engineering standpoint. So, Creed took more of a lighter weight approach with that, where you can get in and you can box someone, right? And it's kind of, we try to figure out what's the easiest thing we can do that has the most kind of like bang for the buck, so to speak, with multiplayer. But with the vast majority of our titles, we like to have multiplayer in there. We think when you have someone else in the world, it's a validating part of the experience. It adds something else. It adds something that's kind of heightens the experience. And I know me personally, I at this point, I don't really play video games unless it's with someone else, because I play it as a way to kind of connect with someone else. So it's that's always been a very important thing for me personally.
I think that's something that's interesting about VR and about sort of the recent uptake of VR headsets, that some of the titles that are really, really popular are not like the traditional gaming titles, like the success of Beat Saber in a way, and titles that are more social, that are more about movement, activity, and I'm wondering what you all think about that. Like, what's the sweet spot there for VR right now? Is it more hardcore gaming? Is it social gaming? Is it social per se? I'm sure you all have different opinions about that.
Yeah, I could just mention, I just played the mini golf game on Quest for a business meeting, actually. Did a little bit of, golfing, business meeting kind of thing. And it was great, honestly. It was exactly what you want. It was like physical, but not too physical. There's a lot of wrist motion. I don't know, Electronauts is very much like this as well. You can move your wrist all day long. Once you start moving your arm around, you start going like this especially, then it's like you got 5 minutes of that, and then you're kind of like annoyed and tired, right? So finding that ergonomic sweet spot where you can continuously do the motions over time is important. And it had just this Walkabout mini golf. It had just the right amount of social features. So it was, I would say, a good kind of balance. Was that title?
Maureen.
I agree. Well, I really think casual games are doing well because casual games, I think, do well in general. The main thing when we were at Zynga is people didn't even think that the things that we were creating were games. It was actually super annoying because all the AAA people were like, you guys suck, you're not creating real games. But I was like, oh, but we have millions and millions of people. The awesome thing on Farmville is we had like 33 million players a day. That was awesome to create something that 33 million people are seeing per day. It's because it was a way for people to connect more than them thinking like I'm playing a game. And that just widens the audience to everyone because everyone wants to hang out with other people. Yeah. And I find VR actually somewhat similar. The reason why people say they want to do VR. So for Farmville and a lot of the games we had, they said it's not so much a game. It's like, I just want some control. Like, this is my little plot of land that I have complete control over, that I can zone out and not think about all the crazy problems of my day and anxiety. And for VR, it definitely has that meditative effect too, right? Where you go in and you can escape the world. And so you don't necessarily want to go in and be super stressed out. You might just want to be in there and chill out. And so having these more casual games is, I think, perfect for that. But also like Beat Saber exercising, of course, is something that people want to do too. So I think Beat Saber is exercise without thinking that you're exercising, which I'm always a fan of because I hate exercising and thinking about it. So I think it's a very simple game mechanic, but it's not just about game mechanics. It's also like I'm just having fun dancing. Go ahead, Joanna.
Well, I have a lot of comments on this. So I just read this book. It was actually from 10 years ago, but it's called Reality is Broken. I don't know if you've all read that, but
great book.
It was a great book. It broke down why games like that were called casual games, and it unfortunately had more to do with like misogyny than any other reason for differentiating between types of games. So and I would kind of take a step back on this, and I don't think it's really about like, is this the right type of game or that the right type of game? I think it's more, as when we think about virtual reality as this next wave of computing and the next wave of interaction around entertainment. I come from a television world, and so it's more about what as we want to keep expanding our audience and keep giving everybody something exciting and interesting to do in VR, it makes sense to have different things to do. Right? The same way if you think about television or film, not all films are the same. Not all films are targeting the same group of people, and same thing with these experiences. And so we see people who love our headsets because they're really, really excited about racing or flight sim. They're doing Microsoft Flight Simulator or iRacing or other things like that. But then we also want to bring people in who are using it to connect. I mean, in that book I just talked about, they said, I think it was Words with Friends, that most people were actually playing with their moms, and they were using it as a way to connect with their moms on a daily basis. And so that just happened to be the medium. And so there will be places in VR where like it's Altspace or VR Chat or Big Screen or Engage, that you're there, but you're there to be able to be with other people. And then for me, I think that there is something really powerful in those experiences where you are moving about, and it can be something like Creed or Beat Saber that was mentioned. I do a lot of Supernatural, and both of my parents and my 8-year-old niece all play a lot of Supernatural. And so it has that fun and that movement and the music, and you're in a different environment, which is particularly captivating right now, because the truth is we're all just like always in the same house or apartment and don't get to go out and experience. So I think that what's great about VR and with all the brilliant content creators who are out there building new things and testing new things and trying new things is that helps build the ecosystem, and it helps build and attract new people into the technology who can then continue to expand and create.
At the same time, there's a push to get sort of AAA gaming titles into VR, and I think this week anyway, Facebook made sort of a point of saying that this is one of their goals to going forward. So, which makes me wonder, who will build the next big franchises? Right now, it seems like it's these surprise smaller companies or companies that start as small startups, like Beat Saber, the Beat Games folks, which really was just like a dozen people or a handful of people when they started out. Do you need to be small in order to understand this medium and be successful in it, or can a big game studio just throw a lot of money at it and then also have a really successful title just because they have the IP? And I'm sure Maureen and Nathan, you both have thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Either one gets started.
Yeah, I mean, I think just real quick, the companies that focus on the customer, the customer needs in VR are very different than any other platform. And all of the, sorry if there's some sound behind me, but all of the accessibility needs and, one little thing gets in the way of an experience and connecting, and all of a sudden it just doesn't work anymore. So the traditional companies have to adjust to be able to do that. Whereas the smaller guys who are just focused on VR, they have an advantage there, basically.
Maureen, what do you think?
I agree. I think the reason why for you to achieve economies of scale in a big company, you take a formula and you try to replicate it as many times as possible. So they know how to do things a certain way. It doesn't mean they absolutely couldn't, but it would have to be like a intrapreneurship type thing, right? Where it's a team and you let them do their own thing rather than try to use the same exact processes. And I think that's why the smaller companies do. And I also actually feel like I know when we're hiring people, people who are experts in film or experts in games, sometimes they have a lot of baggage about how games are supposed to be, how films are supposed to be, or the process in which you do things. And in order to successfully transition to creating in a new medium, you have to, stop thinking in that way because you're creating something new. You have to be not see it as a trade-off of oh, I'm so pissed off because in VR, I don't get to have these level of graphics anymore. It's got to be, I don't have these level of graphics, but oh my gosh, look at this thing I get. And that is totally worth the trade-off. You have to love the awesomeness of VR. So I almost find it sometimes I love hiring fresh grads because they're like fans of everything, but they don't have these preconceived notions. And then it just makes them way more able to be open-minded about things. So I absolutely think a big company can do it. It just with the right mindset. And I think the advantage that these little companies have, and to be honest, it's very hard being a startup. You're making sure you don't die on a daily basis. But what's really exciting is you're bringing in these people with are multi-talented and are generalists, not necessarily specialists who, and I think that's what's needed in VR when you need to experiment and bring together disciplines in ways that you wouldn't normally to create. So,
Joanna, you've worked with a bunch of different companies, startups in the location-based space and beyond. Who has the right DNA? Who gets it and who doesn't? And obviously, I don't expect you to name names now, but in general, what do you need to be successful?
I think there's a couple of things that I think are interesting in building a little bit on what Maureen and Nathan said. One, there's something about being endemic or starting the product or the production in VR and thinking about it for VR. I think what we've seen in a lot of the cases is that sometimes the VR for a big IP comes as a marketing extension for a film. And so it may have been an afterthought. It may have been something that somebody cobbled together late in the process. It may have been, or it may be, there's a big, huge budget for the huge game, and then let's just do a little tiny bit of budget for this VR version of it. And so whereas the studios and the content creators that are living and breathing VR all day long, I think have developed their muscle, developed the skill set to make amazing, excellent products, and have learned along the way. So that's one thing. I don't know that you can always compare it, to something that gets done, even if it's by a big studio and a big IP, if it isn't their focus and they're just doing it as a sort of add-on or ancillary. That's one thing, I think. And then the other thing is the reason that the big IP is exciting is that you don't have to train people on that world and that story. With VR technology, you're already bringing people into a new technology and bringing them up a learning curve in that. And then if you are, but if they already know that story or that world, that universe, and are excited about those characters and being in that world, that might attract them. But then on the flip side, that IP is usually really expensive. And so the numbers that you have to hit to be considered a success, the financials might not be there, right? So that's something else to think about. Is it worth it to maybe you'll have to not have to pay as much for marketing, but the numbers that you have to hit make it that it's really hard to have a positive ROI.
That's a really interesting point. I think I want to say in 2019, it's sort of hard to even think back in the calendars all jumbled with 2020. But exactly, sometime pre-pandemic, Zuckerberg was at Oculus Connect or Facebook Connect and said, once we have 10 million VR headsets out there in the ecosystem, then we can have sustainable companies, and then this economy is going to work, and then startups don't have to scramble anymore and think every day about whether they will die or not, to your point, Maureen. So Facebook won't tell us how many headsets they've sold, and I don't know, Joanna, if you can tell us how many headsets HP has sold. Probably not either. But I'm wondering in general.
There's been a lot of numbers out there that people have published for all the different headsets that.
I mean, those are always a little bit guesstimates. But I'm just thinking in general, how far away are we from this becoming sustainable, and how much content creators still relying on basically deals with platforms in order to get their work subsidized in a way?
I wish Tippertat was here because he has data, but he would show you that there
you're allowed to hit Tippertat. We wish.
Yes.
We would cover soon.
He has data showing that there are many games out there that are making enough money to be profitable. That being said, it's only a few, so you have to be a breakout hit. But that's the same as every single thing in the entertainment industry. In general, the entertainment industry is a money-losing business, so you do it because you love it. But the breakout hits are the ones that take the lion's share of all the money. So it's small, but it's promising. I still think it's still going to take a while, but it's definitely trending that way. What I'd be interested in seeing is post-COVID, and if there's a rush to be outside and not be indoors, there's going to be a slight dip. And so it's how many people can you get to adopt VR right now? People are stuck in their homes. But I'm hoping that there's continued investment, or people see the ones that are hits as a shining example of there is a way to make money. So that gets at least more people trying to create. And then for the ones that are making money, I'm guessing hopefully the platforms are taking a cut of that and getting more money that they can just put back in to funding more of these upstarts to create it. But I would say maybe 2 years where there's a larger market. And for anything beyond gaming, I think 5 to 10 years. And for gaming, I might even say 5 years, because in general, I'm a pessimistic, more conservative person.
Nathan, do you think 5 years? Is that realistic, or?
It might be. I mean, I think the Apple glasses are kind of the big event that everyone's circling on the calendar, right? And I think we see this convergence of AR and VR from a device standpoint. And to me, I actually think VR has really been hurt by the fact that we constantly release new headsets and there's different platforms. And if you look at the Nintendo Switch launch, it went from no one really knowing too much about it to people getting Switches in their hands in a month. Apple has, with their releases, it's the same thing. It's because they're trying to get everyone to kind of come together at the exact same moment and have that really big pop and get the devices in everyone's hands and make the user experience incredibly easy as much as possible. With VR, anyone who's like really into it has an old headset and another old headset, and they have this software and that software, and they're trying to make sense with this platform and that platform and that platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's always another launch that comes out that then gets superseded by yet another launch, so you might as well wait for the next one. So it's kind of, the churn is really difficult. And I think if that churn can somehow get turned down a little bit, and the industry could focus a little more on individual points, then like with individual devices or platforms, have individual moments, then I think that's going to lead to a lot more adoption. And I think the Apple glasses, depending on what their features are, could be a moment where you have a lot of that adoption and people see 10x their sales on a random VR app that just happened to get working on that, which was like an app that didn't even look very good, like the Doodle Jump style app that somehow works well on that platform will just make a ton of money. So I think it is going to happen, but it's going to be driven by those companies. If you just compare, it's important to take a big step back and just compare what the VR user experience is compared to like what customers' expectations are. Like if you buy a television, you turn it on, it works, you watch TV, at least theoretically, right? In today's society, technology is getting more complicated. It's unfortunate, but I think if you can get simpler back to what it used to be, and if it can get relatively inexpensive, I think that adoption will be there.
Joanna, what do you think? Do we need more headsets, less headsets? Wait for the Apple headset?
I think there'll be. I value and recognize Nathan's point, but I think there'll be more. There'll be more headsets coming. A big part of it is, when you think about all the different technology companies and what they're looking at, if you think about where we are today in that computing trend, that we're in the mobile social cloud version of computing, starting back from mainframe and then desktop. And you think about all the different companies that have put their toe in either their toe in the water or their whole their I don't know, whatever expression is after toe, their leg, or I'm not sure where that expression goes. Is that all the companies are all looking at assuming that this is the next platform, what is our role going to be? And so, some of the actions that some of the big players are already taking, you see that they're taking because of what they may have missed a previous wave. And so, they want to, and so they're not the OS today in this wave, but they want to make sure that they're taking actions to try to be the OS in the future. And so you see all of the companies looking at, across from hardware, software, apps, operating system, et cetera, where everyone's looking at what piece of that huge pie that they're going to be able to take. And so I would expect many companies to keep competing in that until you have some clear winners.
So right now, basically, we have 2 or 3 platforms, depending how you count, like PC VR, PlayStation VR, and then Oculus Quest. Once Apple comes around, are we just going to see like a massive, crazy platform war that people will have to decide on which world they're going to live, kind of like Android and iOS?
I think we'll see. I mean, there's more than what you said, because even within PC, there's Steam, there's Viveport, there's Windows Mixed Reality. Though we partner really closely with Steam, and but for that exact point, we're trying to minimize the decision points and make it easier for people. And there's lots of people already in Steam, so we try to make that easier. But I think part of it will be interesting to see where Apple focuses. The rumors are that they're coming in at a very high price point. So we'll see what that. But obviously I have no information, and anyone who does have any information wouldn't be able to comment. So.
Anybody that has information should just send me an email. But
little plug for Janko.
Yeah. Speaking of getting in touch, we have a few more minutes left, and so if people have a question that are watching and have tuned in late, you can send us questions by tweeting with the hashtag #ProtocolVR, and then we may have a couple more minutes to pick up on them. But before we get to the end, I think so. Speaking of these platforms and having to choose between different platforms, one thing is for consumers to decide which headset they're going to buy. The other one is where do you develop on and where do you publish your titles. I think, Nathan, when we talked before, you were saying you're kind of excited about some of this stuff going to the web and WebXR becoming maybe something that runs on every headset. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So basically, web technology is reaching parity with non-web technology. So basically, you could get your native rendering in a web browser can be similar to to running a native app, basically, and using the GPU that you have. So we're seeing that change. Basically, XR, AR and VR is going to be something that you can be able to run through your web browser, and then very easily,
Nathan cut out there for a second.
Lost.
I think maybe the headset. So we're gonna wait until he figures that out. But there's a couple of questions coming in about people watching this who want to get a job in VR, want to get started in VR. And one of the questions in particular was about somebody looking to get started in a narrative field. Maureen, do you have any suggestions for somebody who's new to the industry and enthusiastic? Where should they get started, and how should they prove their chops?
Yeah. For narrative, the amazing thing about being an artist is you don't need permission from anyone. It's not like you need an MD to become a doctor. So it would be literally to make your own. Especially if you want to be a director, you just have a story that you want to tell. You just go make it. You find some friends that. Okay, well, the harder thing is you do need some access to technology to get access to the Oculus and all that. So I would say join. I think one of the best places to go is to join. Well, there's two ways you can go. You can either join a very large company like a Facebook, like a Sony that's working in VR. The benefit of doing that is you have a stable job and you don't have to deal with startup craziness and you get to lord over all the content creators. You get to see all the industry moving, who's succeeding, who's dying, and you get to form opinions about why and why not, and you get to look into you get access to all the data and all the numbers to know what's going on. As a creator, though, a lot of creatives are really bored at a platform because they're not necessarily creating the content unless you're working within one of the studios that say got acquired by Oculus. So then if you want to create content, then going to a small startup is the way to go. And your lack of experience is actually not a negative. It's all about being as eager as possible and willing to roll up your sleeves and do anything. At my startup, we're really small. People, for some reason, think we're hundreds of people. We're only 20. I have to do janitorial work, and my CTO has to do IT work, right? So it's being willing to absolutely do everything because there's too much work. There's not enough people do the work, so there's tons of responsibility that you can take on that you wouldn't necessarily be able to take on at a larger company.
All right, I think we're almost up on time. But there's a couple more questions coming in. One that I want to touch on, which is do we expect regulations to be an issue in health? And related to that, I think with this focus on now education, there's also a question of age and so forth. Headset makers always say you can't use these devices until you're 13 or 14 or something like that. Some of that may be privacy issues too that they don't want to deal with. But I think there's general a caution in the industry officially, and then what everybody does at home is completely different because everybody just hands those things to kids and people use it anyway. So your thoughts on that, really brief, and then maybe we can do a wrap-up round. What are real concerns, perceived concerns, regulations on the horizon? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, the regulations will depend country by country. I think something that we're very focused on is privacy and being really clear with our customers about data and use of data. So for us, that's something that particularly as we go to launch the HP Reverb G2 Omniscept edition, that's tantamount to the way we do business and the way that we in our business model. So that's something that's really key for us.
That makes sense.
I think it's awesome. We'll see when the Apple device comes out, but with Apple's and Facebook's feud, about privacy and making tickle. It's funny, as a developer, right? We want as much information as possible, but as a consumer, I want to give away as little information. So to not be a hypocrite, I'm very happy about a lot of the privacy thing measures that will, take place there. But also just making sure if you're having this device attached to your head at all times, like everything from like radiation to like how it impacts the brain to your eyes and all that. I'm looking forward to there being even more research about that and regulations to protect our health, especially after having, kids. I care a lot more about that than I did before.
Nathan, any thoughts from your side? I think Nathan is still all right. That's also part of our collective 2020 experience. There's always one issue with muting and headsets and all those things. I think it's about time for us to maybe do a wrap-up round. So I'd like to ask you to sort of look ahead at 2021 and give us one prediction of what is going to happen, whether to your particular slice of the industry, to VR in general. What do you think? How are the chips going to fall? And now I'm also struggling with the metaphor here. Once everybody dips their toe in the water, where the chip's going to land? I don't know. So, Joanna, maybe do you want to get started?
I think we're going to continue to see really strong growth. And it's a combination of people being home, people looking to, to connect, to learn, to collaborate, to create in different ways. I think that there's been some really interesting events and film festivals this week. We're all at South by Southwest. Maureen has a premiere there as well. We participated, I came in as an EP on Finding Pandora X, which is a live interactive theater production in VR chat, where we actually have live Broadway actors acting because there's nowhere else they can act right now. So, it's bringing us, but things like having Burning Man for the first time in Altspace and other platforms, people who are in the film industry and got to go to Sundance or South by Southwest or Cannes or Venice and coming into VR for the first time, are going out in many cases and getting headsets and then becoming excited about this new medium, and hopefully will join us in creating content and building out the industry. It's been one of the most exciting things I would say is that like Maureen alluded to before, people are coming in with so many different backgrounds, and it's the blending together of people from the arts and engineering and gaming and psychiatry and the healthcare industry. So many different people coming together who are really optimistic visions of what the future is going to be and wanting to come and make those visions a reality to build out this industry. And so, as we see growth in the headset market, growth in the content being created, I see that this will be a really positive year for the industry.
All right, great. Nathan, how's your audio and what are your predictions for the year?
If you can hear me now.
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. I think we're, I think the pandemic is good for VR. I think in general, I think when people realize being stuck at home, being stuck on Zoom, all these kinds of things, it only is a helpful thing. I think a lot of focus has shifted toward that. I think a lot of people now understand that they have to do business through their computer. They have to, just meet people through their computer at times, that sort of thing. So, I think in general, people are rearranging their positions on the chessboard kind of around that. And then you have the big war with Apple and Facebook, and Sony's in there. So there's plenty of heat that's there. But I think even those companies, everyone is gearing up for things that are going to be coming in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so the one thing that I always look at is that all these devices are fairly different, but if I can make one app that works across them, then I get more users. If I make an app that also allows for AR users in addition to VR users, I get more users. If I allow for regular users to get in there, non-VR, non-AR, right, then I get more users. So it's kind of working across the platforms is typically the way Survios has done it. We also cut deals and work directly with the platform holders, but with working with like WebXR, with some of the new tech that I'm working with, a lot of my goals are to work across those platforms and be able to have an experience with anyone to say, oh, don't worry, we support that, or you can jump in and watch what we do in VR from non-VR, or that sort of thing. So that's what I think is one of the ways you can have success in this market.
All right, great. Maureen, do you want to close us out with your thoughts on the coming months?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the metaverse stuff that's happening and allowing you to hang out with each other. I think we're seeing amazing boom in that and more events being created. But I'm also very excited about the ability to cross between live events and virtual events, because as we're leaving the pandemic, people will start having more of these live events, group events, but there's still a large population who won't necessarily feel comfortable. And also these people, all of us who have been at home, are now more used to attending things virtually. So I think there is something there where there will be these live events that also happen virtually. And I'm interested in how the virtual people intermingle with the live people, and also the business models that come out of that.
All right, great. Well, this is a great note to close out on. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to Joanna. Thanks to Maureen. Thanks to Nathan for joining us today. Thanks to everybody for following this event online, watching, tuning in, tweeting questions at us. If you want more of this, again, I am writing a weekly newsletter about the future of technology entertainment. That's called Next Up. You can subscribe to it on protocol.com/newsletters. And we also have a couple more events coming up in the next couple of days, one about reinventing Section 230 and a couple other events. If you want to learn more about that, just go to protocol.com. We have more information there. And with that, thanks so much, and see you all next time.